welcome back to the garage, everyone. All right, so I think I've got a little sideline project here while we figure out what our next big maintenance item is going to be on our 300SD. So you can probably recognize this as the wood trim off of the glove compartment. You'll note here that the previous owner had some strange ideas about the type of glue that needed to be put on this thing. So I'm assuming it came off at some point and they tried to glue it. The glue that they had on here was just gobbed on. It was crazy. Actually, I think it was wood glue. I think it was like maybe Elmer's or something like that. So I'll need to figure out what sort of glue I'm going to use to reattach this to the glove box. Just about every W126 that I've seen for sale while I was looking for mine had the same problem. This piece of trim was peeling off at the edges. A lot of them were off, and this is the only one that I found that had a decent piece of trim on the glove compartment. That's part of the reason I bought it, but it didn't last very long. As you can tell, it's curved, right? It's curved that way, and it peels. I have my own theory about what's been going on here. I think that whatever clear finish that was used at the factory shrunk over time and caused the wood to bend this way. Consequently, it starts to pop off of the dashboard. My next goal here is to completely remove all of this old glue, sand down and remove this gloss finish, and I'll make a decision as to whether or not I want to stain the wood. If so, I'll find an appropriate stain, or I might not even need to. Then I'll probably go back with a standard high gloss polyurethane. I need to get this thing stripped down, and after I get it stripped down, we need to get it straight again. Okay, we can't put it back on the dash if it's curved like that, right? Because it's going to have that constant pressure. So we've got to alleviate that pressure. We've got to get this thing straight. Once we get it straight, and then we can glue it back on the glove box. So I've got a few things in my arsenal, just laying around the shop. I got some 600. I've got some 1500 and 2000 grit wet dry paper. I've also got some 3M rubbing compound and a few other odds and ends around here. So we're going to use whatever we have in our arsenal to try to restore this piece of wood trim and get it back on the car. Now this little small piece right here, you want to be really careful with that because you can break that off real easy. So I'm gonna have to be real gentle with that. Nothing like a good old screwdriver. So you can see right here, we've got some overhang of the polyurethane coating or whatever coating they used. That is not the wood, but it is the coating. So, and you can see here what it's, over the years, it's broken off. It's actually pretty thick. If we look at the profile of this thing, if I were to sand that off right there, you'd probably see, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of it would be wood and the rest of it would be coating. So this top coating is pretty thick actually. This rough edge here along the bottom, that's got to go. We can't have that. Yeah, so what I'm scraping off is clearly the finish they use, and it's not wood. So when you first start doing something like this, if you've never done it before, you know, obviously you want to be really careful when you first start out, right? If you just go in there hell-bent for leather, you know, you're going to tear something up or you're going to break your work, and that won't be good. So, you know, you start off very careful, and then once you get into it and you get a little more confident, then you can proceed a little faster, but you don't want to become overconfident. Go slow, then move faster if you think you can. And then if you think you're moving too fast, you already are. Now, somebody in the past, I wasn't up that far, somebody in the past has gouged this wood before. I'm guessing that's probably somebody got a hold of this with a screwdriver and tried to pry it off of the glove box so they could re-glue it. All right, that's what we have. And I'm taking an up close and personal look here to see where I missed. There's all your gory details right there, folks. It'll look better as we move forward. So it looks like I've got a little shiny right here. That might be a little glue. I'm not sure. Feels smooth though. And this is not sure about that. It feels smooth. We'll probably hit it another lick or two with the sandpaper though. All right, so we still have our bowing problem. I will strip this down far enough and get some of this coating off, and then put it in a damp environment and with a little heat, put some weights on it and flatten it out like this and let it set for maybe 3 or 4 days. I don't know, we'll see what happens. And see if we can't flatten this thing out. All right, that's just a first pass with the 100 grit paper on the stained side. I'm going to continue on here and get a little more aggressive and remove as much of this outer coating as I think I can before we try to straighten this piece. This is what we got. I've got a little space heater. I've got a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. It's nice and straight. I got a damp towel, and I've got the, obviously have the wooden trim wrapped up in the damp towel, and I've got some weights on it to flatten it out. So I'm going to leave this thing, I don't know, we're going to leave it 24 hours. And we're going to check back in tomorrow and see if our trim piece is any flatter. I heard some of the glue release just then. Either that or I broke it, one or the other. All right, let's see what that, hey, look at that. Ta-da! Heat gun, gotta love that. All right, this has been on the heater for about a day, so let's take this thing off. Let's see what we have. You see the indentations of the weights, no big deal. And what do we have? By golly, we've made progress. Holy cow, look at that. And what we have here on this dashboard trim is a thick inner layer of wood. And then you have a piece of aluminum sandwiched here. And then the darker veneer trim was glued over the top of this. The aluminum sandwich here was done, I don't know, maybe as a safety feature to prevent splintering of the wood in case of an accident. That was some comments I read online. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. At this point, I'm not really concerned about it. I think what I'm going to do is simply just rebuild it as it was. So I have separated these. And I've got the other piece of wood that goes, I've got that in my cabinet over there. We'll glue that back on. And right now I am using the power sander. I want a nice rough texture for on this aluminum for the glue to stick. From the factory, I would say that this aluminum was just bare and very smooth, and over time the glue just didn't stick to it. That's probably part of the reason why these things start to delaminate. All right, this is what we have here. I've got this whole piece of aluminum sanded down with the die grinder. It just took the all the glue off and just roughed it up just a little bit. And I think our glue job is going to work out really well with this. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and get the remnants of the glue off of the inside piece of wood, get it sanded down, and then I need to figure out what sort of glue I'm going to use. All right, I've moved on to the inside piece of wood here, and I've got it sanded down pretty well. I got all the glue off of it. I think it's pretty good. These two pieces right here, they were about to come off, so I went ahead and just popped them off. And I'll be re-gluing these back on as well. I'm just going to use standard wood glue for that. I think that would be appropriate. And you know, there's some delamination here and as well on this end. So right there, some delamination there. So the first thing I'm going to do is put some Titebond wood glue on either end and clamp these in place and get that and let that sit for a few hours and get that done. All right, so while we've got our glue setting up, I'm going to briefly clean the aluminum with a little acetone. This ought to take about 10 seconds. Anyway, be careful with this stuff. Don't breathe it. You know, what I'm going to do is turn on my little fan right here. I got a fan just off to the side. Anytime I work with something that has some fumes, I have this little fan next to me and it blows the fumes away from me. I'm guessing they never did this at the factory. I think they probably just took a bare piece of aluminum and they did not sand it or scuff it up or anything like that. They just started gluing stuff to it. I'm also assuming that they used contact adhesive, which I guess is good for a few years. But eventually it starts to let loose. All right, so that part is nice and clean. I'm going to put it in the shelf and wait for our Titebond to dry. All right, let's get a status update on our veneer trim here to see how flat we are. This has been in here for a couple of days. Okay, now that piece there, that didn't turn out too well, but I think we can handle that. This is the top part of the trim. It cracked and broke off, and there's the end of it right there. So we're going to have to deal with that, but I think we can handle it. All right, we're going to glue the aluminum to the inner wooden piece first, and I'm going to use JB Weld. And epoxy, in my opinion, is probably best for that application. So that's what we're going to do. All right, let's glue it up. Need to make sure we get the ends nice and even here. And I'm not really worried about the squeeze out because JB Weld is sandable. Looks kind of like that. Pretty nasty, isn't it? Doesn't really look that good right now, but it will when we're done. I guarantee you one thing. This piece of aluminum will never be separated from this piece of wood ever again. All right, we're going to wrap this thing up. So I got JB Weld pretty much all over the place. That's all right. It's sandable, so you know when it dries, we'll just, if we got some squeeze out, we'll just sand it off. It'll be all right. Relax, it'll be fine. We're nice and aligned. We have good alignment. And this doesn't have to be pretty, folks. This is not the business end. I'm going to let this dry at least 24 hours. I'm really liking that. That looks pretty doggone good. This is going to be nice and solid. And this should never come apart again, ever. All right, so the inside piece of this glove box dash trim has been sitting inside drying for a couple of days. I just pulled the rubber bands off. Of course, you know, there's some JB Weld here and there, and I had to sand it off. So I just roughed this up with some 100 grit because when I put the top layer of veneer on this thing, and again I'll use JB Weld. I want to make sure that it sticks. All right, so up next I'm going to work on the outer veneer, do a little more sanding on it, trying to get it ready for bonding to our aluminum core. All right, there's no sense in getting scientific about that because it's all warped. We got to get some pressure on it. So let's go ahead and get some rubber bands on this thing. And we'll put one on the other end. Make our life easier. Now the rubber bands are only so strong. I'll tell you what, let's put one in the middle too. And then we'll put some string on it. So you need to hold it down with one hand. Twirl your string with the other. So I hold it down on this one side and wrap it. All right, let me check the other side. It's nice and tight too. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. And let's move on down the line. So it was a little open there. I've closed the opening with my fingers. All right, I think we got it. A few more wraps and I'll wrap it up. All right, I'm going to show you the exquisite, beautiful nature of our JB Weld veneer operation. Isn't it gorgeous? It's just outstanding. Squeeze out everywhere, JB Weld all over your hands, all over the string, all over the rubber bands, all over the wood, the metal. But you know what? When this thing dries, it'll be there until the end of time. All right, well, there you go. Ready to put back on the car. Yeah, not just yet. All right, so that's what that's looking like right there. This top part, I've got another piece of veneer in the cabinet. This top veneer broke off, and I have this thin strip in the cabinet over there. So we'll glue that on last. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and hit this with 100 grit sandpaper all the way around and clean up all this JB Weld and string, and we'll come back with you here in just a minute. Just to give you a glimpse of what it's going to look like, put a little spit on my finger right there, and you can tell, you know, right away that, you know, after you get some polyurethane on this thing, it's going to look real nice. So Yep, I'm looking forward to this. All right, that's what it's going to look like, folks, when we're done. So stay tuned. More to come. All right, so it's been about a day and a half here on this glue job on the top piece of veneer. So I'm going to go ahead and take this string and rubber bands off and see what we have. Okay, we just clipped all the string and rubber bands off of there, and as you can see, it looks absolutely fabulous, and I think it's ready to go on the car. Well, yeah, Okay, so here's the deal. You know, it always looks crappy until it looks better, at least the stuff I work on anyway. So I've got to, let me clean up all this mess with some sandpaper. All right, here's what we have in our arsenal. We have early American, we have red mahogany, and we have dark walnut. I decided to forego the application of wood filler after an initial sanding. This is actually pretty smooth, and the JB Weld has filled in a lot of the gaps. So I'm kind of hoping that JB Weld is stainable. We're going to find out. Okay, so here we go. What I'm going to do is I've got some old rags here, and I'm going to take each one of these and I'm going to apply some stain to this little piece of wood, and then we're going to compare it against our trim piece and see which one fits the best. Maybe we'll mix them, maybe we'll apply them lighter or stronger. I don't know, we'll find out. We're going to play around with this for a little while and see what happens. All right, so that's the first pass. Just put a real light coat of the early American. There was still a little bit of the old clear coating still left on the stain on this wood. So the additional stain just sort of brought that out and made it prettier. But I'm going to have to double up on the stain on that gap right there and see if I can't get that a little darker. We have 2 coatings of stain on the glove box trim piece. And up next, a first coat of high gloss polyurethane. If you've never used polyurethane before, your first coat is going to leave some small bubbles. Some of the bubbles will pop and go away as the product dries. The ones that don't pop and go away, you will need to give them a quick sanding with some extremely fine grit sandpaper once the product is dried. We're going to hit this very lightly with a 600 once this is dry, and then we'll come back and we'll put another coat on, and I think after that we'll probably step up to maybe 1,000 or 1,500, and maybe a third coat. We want to build layers, and in between each layer you want to knock out the bubbles after they dry. After the final coat dries, you can hit it with some 000 or 000 steel wool just to knock out any final imperfections, and then you could polish it with some, just some paste wax or maybe it's a little bit of 3M rubbing compound, something that with a creamy texture to give it a final polish so it'll really pop when you put it on the car. So we're going to let this dry. All right, more later. All right, we've been drying now for, I don't know, about 5 hours. So it's time to do our first sanding on our polyurethane. So you can feel here, there's that cheap Harbor Freight brush I used had a bunch of trash in it. Well, we got it off there. Okay, had to get a little aggressive with my 600 grit since the instructions call for 220. Clearly, I had to work a little harder, in other words. All right, we did a little better job on the second coat, so next up we have another 5 hours to wait, and it's a little late in the day, so guess what that means? It means tomorrow we will do the third coat. All right, everyone, looks like we are done. Our glove box trim piece is, restoration has been completed. We got the 2 wooden feet glued back onto the bottom, and we've got a little black paint right on the end there. Did that with a little modeling brush. I think that turned out pretty well. Right now, we're going to put this back on the car. All right, we're getting our trim piece installed on the glove box cover. You'll note that I've got it removed from the car. We've got 2 screws on these 2 hinges here on the bottom removed. And it's kind of easier to get it done on the workbench over here. So getting this back on the glove box is a little tricky. Do not take the latch apart. Just take your 3 screws on the back of your latch and loosen them just a little bit, and take this latch and kind of pull it out just a touch, so that you can slide this guy in there, because your trim piece has a little recess here and your latch needs to set in there. I did the best I could with what I had on hand. Is it perfect? Far from it, but it looks pretty good. The top piece, you know, you can see the little trim piece where we had to glue that on. You know what? The car will be absolutely original, and this trim piece will never delaminate ever again. We kept the car original. We didn't have to go cannibalize some other Mercedes car to keep this car original, and I kind of like that. And if it's got a little flaw here and there, so be it. It adds character. All right, let's get this thing on the car and finish up. Well, there you have it. We got the new glove box trim attached, got the glove box lid reattached on the car, and we're ready to go. Well, except for this. You'll note that I have some of the stuff torn apart here. I've been doing a lot of troubleshooting on the electrical gremlin that I've been trying to trace down, and that finally I found out what the issue was, and it is the electric antenna. You may recall in a separate video, I had a current drain on the electric antenna that was already in this car. I ordered a refurbished antenna, installed it. It had the same problem. And I've been talking to the vendor on that, and we both agree that they have the same problem. And he is sending me yet another antenna, so I'm waiting on that one. And anyway, during the meantime, I was doing all this electrical troubleshooting, and man, I had everything torn apart and trying to trace down. I was just looking at all my grounding connections, and oh man, it was a mess. Well, anyway, that's enough of that. One more thing I wanted to add, though. You might notice that this is not the same level. This sticks out farther than this. That's because this is now refurbished and is back in the place where it ought to be. Now this one, you see right here, you got the top veneer is coming off of the aluminum is coming off of the wooden base, and the wooden base is falling apart. So this whole thing is a basket case, and all of the trim in this car is pretty much doing the same thing. So this is just the first go around. I went to school on this one, and I'll be redoing all the trim in this car. Matter of fact, I'm working on the driver's door right now, and that'll be an upcoming video. So we've got a couple of upcoming videos that we're going to be coming out with. We're going to be redoing the trim on this door, doing some work on this door, and we're going to put the new electric antenna in. So anyway, that's about it for now, guys. I want you to know that I really appreciate you guys stopping by my channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Take it easy.